If you finish this video, you will come to the same conclusions that I have. Hair loss is all about sex, reproduction, and fertility. I am AQBS and this is Back to the Barber. Before I began this natural hair restoration journey, like many of you, I was under the assumption that my hair loss was strictly genetic, that my thinning and balding hair was simply due to a genetic switch causing my hairs to shed in the typical Norwood pattern. My genes were in control, not my diet, not the topicals that I use, not my internal health nor my habits. Somewhere along the way, I started having doubts about that premise. Fast forward to today, after years and years of research, testing, and creating topical and digestible hair regrowth products from scratch, I have come to the realization that although sincere, I went about this in the wrong manner. It was never about what was missing from the scalp. It was truly about what was present that shouldn't have been. In this video, I am going to attempt to wrap your mind around the possibility that hair growth is a microcosm of sex and reproduction from several different angles. And when you adopt this mentality and embrace this theory, not only will you understand how you got to where you are, you will be able to map out how to go undetectable in hair loss. The path is how our mind mapped the way to reverse hair loss, but it mostly deals with the reconstitution of the scalp environment to pre-balding through the trigger and 4 doorways. However, although I highly depend on it as a foundational theory to reversing my hair loss, having an understanding of the natural order of things pre-balding allows you to envision what the regrowth threshold really entails. The only thing that I ask of you is to keep an open mind, feel the message between the words, and reflect back on your own experiences. With that said, DHT is a Chad and Tyrone. Why do I say that? We all know that anywhere on the body, including the scalp, androgens such as tests are integral in the hair growth process. These hormones are needed to induce the growth of terminal hair. I've spoken about follicles being feminine and seemingly impregnated by the masculine hormones. Yet DHT is supposedly the most masculine hormone, more powerful than test itself, 5 times to be exact, with many experts telling young men to highly consider the ramifications of DHT inhibiting too early in their life when they are still developing. Intuitively, we know this is true. I highly doubt that DHT is actually a trash hormone. It seems to be overrepresented due to trash environmental conditions, if anything. Consequently, young men have more DHT, but considerably less hair loss than old men. It's apparent the young men's DHT is working appropriately in the right setting, and the opposite for older men. This answers the paradox of aging and DHT hair loss. Where there is hair loss, there is an immune response, inflammation, and or plaque, if not all. Yet the feminine follicle is somehow attracted to this alternate version of test for a reason. From an environmental perspective, DHT is overproduced because it is a medicine for inflammation, while cholesterol, plaque, seems to be the medicated salve collected in the scalp to the point that the lipids draining system is overrun. If you were to view this as in the sexual marketplace, you will find that we date what we have access to locally or who's in our proximity or social circle. The dating and sexual escapades of feminine follicles with androgens are no different. Yes, the DHT can bind to or enter into the feminine follicle as an intercourse, as it has the toolkit for compatibility, but it won't produce anything of value such as hair. It basically is the F-boy of androgens when it comes to hair growth. The sex between the follicle and DHT is unnatural love and false compatibility strictly out of convenience. DHT sees a ripe opening and it takes advantage of it. The follicle, having very little test to choose from in an environment saturated by Chaz and Tyrone, has very little choice but to copulate with the degenerate hormone DHT. Like in the macro world, the fun doesn't last very long because although DHT may produce alpha conditions, it is far from the best mating choice. Even when you look at the hair growth cycle, you will find stark similarities between it and the gestation periods of embryos in the womb. The parallels of reproduction cycles such as ovulation, fertilization, and gestation is almost identical to the hair cycle with anagen, catagen, and telogen. The baby starts off as a seed produced by the man that then fertilizes the egg produced by the woman. After fertilization, the egg goes through the stages of cellular division, becoming more complex as it develops into a form capable of living outside of the womb. The dermal papilla seems to be the ovary of the hair follicle, and the cells that generate hair creates the embryo, which are vellus hairs that grow to small hairs that go terminal, eventually making their way out of the follicle womb. See my video, vellus hairs are terminal hairs waiting for fertilization, for more information on this. Another similarity between hair regrowth and sexual reproduction is the womb having its own immune system separate from the body's immune system. The purpose of this is to keep the body from attacking the terminal hairs due to its rapid growth and being somewhat separate from the follicle itself. The same with the uterus or womb of a woman. We call it immune privilege as the rapid growth of the child, and it being distinctly separate from the woman's body causes the body to treat it as a foreign invader or perhaps a cancer or a tumor. This rejection function is seen plain as day when the child's blood type is different than the host's blood type, such as a Rh negative child being birthed by a Rh positive mother. RhoGAM is given to the mom to prevent her immune system from attacking the baby. Now, when you hear the phrase that your scalp follicles are being attacked by the immune system and it causes hair loss, your question should be this: how bad is it that even the follicle's own immune system has totally malfunctioned, or the body simply rejected the privilege due to the sheer toxicity of the environment and took matters into its own hands? The fertility component of follicles is also something to consider. I have noticed in my own restoration efforts is that where there is plaque, there is inflammation. Where there is inflammation, there is also other side effects such as irritation and tenderness. And if you have these factors in the scalp, there will be an overproduction of medicine as a deterrent of those conditions in the form of androgens. I believe the excessive production of androgens either causes or represents overaccumulation of scalp sebum, cholesterol, and the eventual calcification and fibrosis of the dermal layers. We can simply look at two distinct reproductive aspects of feminine reproduction and see how fibrosis causes infertility, uterine fibroids, and ovarian cysts. Both of these occurrences can cause a woman to not become impregnated, and as a matter of fact, it can cause PCOS type of side effects where she may begin to ironically produce more androgens. Listen to this irony. The feminine organs develop a cyst or a fibroid that not only causes infertility, it can actually promote the lowering of feminine hormones, which would in turn cause a spike in masculine hormone production. This internal uterine issue manifests on the scalp as female pattern hair loss, but also causes male sex hair growth to propagate on the chin and the chest of women. Isn't this just like the plaque buildup that causes the semi-permanent telogen state of hair follicles in androgenic alopecia? Plaque in the scalp are the fibroids of the uterus, or acne and inflammation is our version of cyst in the ovaries. I call scalp plaque dermal gingivitis for this very reason. On another note, there are 3 things that you can catch from sex: feelings, a child, and unfortunately, disease. Early on, I never felt as if male pattern balding was a true disease in itself, but a conditional state, and I pretty much confirmed that over this journey. However, The follicles themselves do seem to have a disease, and it seems to be dermatitis and or folliculitis. Many would argue against this, and that is another video. But when you look at our mitigation efforts or therapies, the balanced and intelligent hair loss reversal regimens always have immune suppressing ingredients and those with anti-inflammatory properties. What I'm about to say now is relatively unknown in the hair loss industry, and just like many of my other theories, this one could only be discovered in slow and steady natty restoration. The healing of the follicles by removing plaque and creating a less tense, less acidic, and less alpha environment due to androgens acts more like you are healing an individual disease within the follicle itself for several different reasons. If you pay attention, you will see that hair loss moves backwards, as if the follicles nearest each other succumb to the same poison or illness. Consider how the frontal hairline moves backwards in lockstep as each follicle goes into a chromatic telogen state. Similarly, in the crown, the body moves outward like the follicles are dying forward, passing the illness, almost like an STD, to those in front of them. If nothing is done to stop it, eventually every hair on the galea succumbs to this. In my case, the reversing of this process illustrates the same phenomenon, but in reverse. The follicles in the vicinity of a newly awakened follicle that is starting to regrow hair also grow through this process of restarting the anagen stage. It's almost as if the small area's environment is becoming conducive to regrowth again, and it causes all near follicles to begin their hair cycle process as well. From the outside, it's almost as if I am reversing the STD that the follicles have caught from whatever caused the immune reaction trigger, all the while cleaning the symptoms of it. Eventually, they will become fertile again. Figuratively, by cleansing the environment, I am giving the follicle an opportunity to be courted and to practice copulation with growth hormones instead of DHT. This curing of the follicle STD expands outward, engulfing other follicles. Eventually, the reproductive cycles, or what we call the hair growth cycles of large groups of follicles, their menstruation seems to sink, just as women who live in close proximity over time, all due to hormones. This is why 80% of hair follicles are in the growth stage, while the other 20% are going telogen or exogen. The sex and reproduction component of hair regrowth doesn't just stop here. You all are already aware that we use prostate suppressing BPH medicines to assist with hair loss recovery, or to at the very least stop hair loss in its tracks. On the opposite end, estrogen therapy has been used to promote hair regrowth as well. In this case, we are almost suppressing the masculine hormone or aspect while promoting the feminine aspects through hormonal therapy. We can view this as increasing the fertility of both the present rightful androgens in the scalp, or increasing the fertility of the follicles in the scalp. With both aspects healthy and fertile, conception of hair growth is guaranteed. You can view follicles, especially the dermal papilla, as the egg in the ovaries, and testosterone as the sperm. You can see DHT as being impotent in the way that it can enter the follicle but cannot impregnate it to cause hair growth. There will be no conception, or much less of it. Lastly, I would like to mention that the very herbs that I use to promote hair growth have 4 basic purposes that lead to the restoration of follicles and hair regrowth. If you were to view these herbs in a sexual reproduction way, you can clearly see how not only to halt hair loss, but to slowly reverse it to the point hair loss becomes undetectable, which is the goal. 1. Herbs are suppressing DHT, which to me is also suppressing cholesterol buildup. If this was about true reproductive sex, inhibiting DHT would be like replacing an impotent man or one that has had a vasectomy with a fertile man. DHT can also be seen as a follicle birth control, and ridding the scalp of it is like removing a condom during sex. 2. Herbs are causing vasodilation, circulation increase. This is like a woman who is eating healthy, taking her prenatal vitamins, and lives in an overall healthy environment with little stress. The circulation boost is providing more nutrients and oxygen to the growing baby, the terminal hair. 3. Herbs have antipathogenic and anti-inflammatory properties. This is boosting the immune of the follicles by targeting the triggers such as pathogens or parasites that cause the immune system to react. My guess is they originated in the gut. Sanitation is the key. Thus, the womb is closed off and protected like the follicle's immune privilege. By removing inflammation and sickness through parasites in the dermal layers, the baby or the terminal hairs can grow in a more healthy, less inflamed, stable environment. And finally, 4. Herbs can promote the estrogenic and or omega state of the follicles where androgens are balanced, not dominant. As long as inflammation is not present, then the androgens that are present are the activators, not the conquerors or medicine. Sadly, like stress to a woman carrying can cause a uterine miscarriage, the follicles under acute follicle stress also miscarries a child, and that is what we call hair loss. What is hair loss but a follicle miscarriage? What does acute inflammation and tension cause but involuntary abortions? In conclusion, hair regrowth seems to be the microcosm of sex and reproduction for many different reasons. It mirrors sex and reproduction through shared biological processes, growth cycles, symbolic meaning, and male-female social dynamics. You can almost say that the way to hair regrowth is to create an environment of fit, feminine, and fertile follicles that accept testosterone, having no need to bond with DHT. I believe when true men are in the vicinity, test. Chad and Tyrone, aka DHT, has no chance in a healthy environment. In a toxic one, such as scalp alopecia, just the opposite. As for your protocol, another direct, more practical way of viewing natty hair loss restoration is you can solve the yeast or the fibroids issue of the follicle. That's plaque. You can heal the ovary cyst, that's inflammation and dermal acne. You can remove the impotent DHT partner and replace it with a fertile one of Tess, who fosters growth and works perfectly in balance with feminine hormones. Lastly, you can provide prenatal pills and nutrients in the form of circulation or vasodilation topicals. If your regimen or protocol does this continuously over time, you will see a bald, bare scalp skin develop villus hairs, and they will in turn go full term, which is another word of saying terminal. The regrow threshold, is it nothing but when your scalp has been made more fertile than impotent? Like, subscribe, and comment, as iron sharpens iron, and we only have each other. And remember, if I can do it, you all can do it too. Let's get you back to the barber.